Isabel Ramirez's cell phone remained powered on for days after she disappeared in San Antonio, Texas, a vibrant city of 1.5 million residents. October 7th, 2006 began as an ordinary autumn day, with gentle breezes rustling through the pecan trees lining the historic streets. At 9:23 a.m., security cameras at La Cantera Mall captured the 32-year-old elementary school teacher leaving a boutique coffee shop, laughing into her phone while promising her son she'd be home to help with his science project. Isabel wore a crimson blouse, dark jeans, and moved with the confident stride known to colleagues at Franklin Elementary, where she taught second grade. A witness briefly noticed her walking toward her red Honda Civic, keys jingling in her hand. What unfolded in the hours that followed would plunge San Antonio into a mystery that haunted the city for 16 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. San Antonio, Texas stands as a city where history and modernity intertwine, where the Alamo's stone walls rise beside glass skyscrapers. The Riverwalk pulses with tourists and locals alike, while neighborhoods like King William District preserve their historic charm. In a two-story Spanish-style home in Alamo Heights, Isabel Ramirez lived with her husband Carlos and their 10-year-old son Miguel. At 32, Isabel balanced teaching second grade with volunteer work at her church and being a devoted mother. Friends described her as the woman who remembered everyone's birthdays, who stayed late helping struggling students, and who always carried a book in her purse. October 7th, 2006 began like any Saturday in the Ramirez household. Isabel left home early that morning, heading to La Cantera Mall to pick up a birthday gift for her sister. She planned to meet friends for lunch later. Security footage showed a woman in a crimson blouse browsing shops, stopping for coffee, then heading toward the parking garage at 9:23 a.m. As she walked, Isabel called her son Miguel. Her voice was bright and animated. She reminded him to gather materials for his volcano science project, saying she'd bought the baking soda he needed. She promised to be home before noon to help him. It was a simple, ordinary conversation, but it became the last time anyone heard Isabel's voice. After that moment, her predictable Saturday shattered. Her phone went unanswered. Text messages remained unread. As morning turned to afternoon, Carlos grew increasingly concerned. He paced their front porch, occasionally walking to the corner where Isabel's car normally turned. Miguel sat by the window, science project materials spread across the dining table, watching for his mother's red Honda. As daylight faded into evening, the once lively house fell into an uneasy silence. Carlos called Isabel's friends, who confirmed she never arrived for lunch. Her sister hadn't heard from her either. The kitchen remained untouched, dinner unmade. Calls to Isabel's phone rang and rang before going to voicemail. No message, no warning, just absence where Isabel should have been. Initial worry quickly transformed into gut-wrenching fear. For Carlos and Miguel, each passing hour without word sharpened their panic. Where had Isabel Ramirez gone after that 9:23 a.m. phone call? What happened between the mall security camera and her car? As the clock struck 8 p.m., Carlos could wait no longer. Heart racing, he picked up the phone and called 911. His voice, steady but tense, told the dispatcher, "My wife is missing." Within 20 minutes, blue and red lights flashed through the windows of their Alamo Heights home, casting strange shadows across Miguel's untouched science project. Two officers entered carrying notepads, asking pointed questions that felt somehow intrusive. They asked Carlos to describe Isabel's exact schedule, what she wore when she left, which shops she planned to visit, what she said in her final call. Carlos answered precisely, his voice controlled while Miguel sat nearby, nodding silently, eyes wide with fear. One officer asked if Isabel had shown signs of distress lately. Were there problems at home? Financial troubles that might cause her to leave? Carlos's composure cracked momentarily. "No," he said firmly. Isabel had no reason to leave her family or her students. Something happened to her. The officer wrote this down without comment, but Carlos caught the skeptical glance exchanged between the two policemen. Outside, patrol lights drew neighbors' attention. First a few peered from windows, then several gathered on the sidewalk. Mrs. Hernandez from next door brought over a plate of tamales and a thermos of hot chocolate for Miguel. "Isabel will be back soon," she whispered, squeezing Carlos's arm, though her eyes betrayed her worry. Several neighbors formed an impromptu search party, driving around nearby streets and parking lots. They returned with shaking heads and grim expressions. That night, the Ramirez home transformed from tension to chaos. The phone rang constantly with calls from Isabel's parents in Mexico City, her fellow teachers, church members, all asking the same question. "Is it true she's missing? Have you found anything?" Carlos repeated the same exhausted answer. "No, we don't know anything yet." In the corner, Miguel curled up with his mother's cardigan, his science project materials still scattered across the table, now seeming like artifacts from another time. When a San Antonio Express news reporter arrived, the sound of cameras clicking seemed to intensify the family's grief. The photos captured Carlos holding Miguel, both their faces etched with fear and confusion. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The image hit online news that night with a stark headline: "San Antonio teacher vanishes without trace." The story spread quickly through the city. While crime wasn't uncommon in parts of San Antonio, for an elementary school teacher, a pillar of her community, to simply disappear sent shockwaves through. Neighborhoods from Alamo Heights to Stone Oak, police left the Ramirez home around midnight after logging details and promising to begin an official investigation immediately. They urged Carlos to get some rest, though everyone knew sleep was impossible in that house that night. As the door closed behind them, Carlos sat in Isabel's reading chair, the house suddenly vast and empty. He had never felt so helpless. Isabel had always been his partner in every family challenge. When Miguel was born premature, when Carlos's mother fell ill, when they debated moving for better jobs. Now with her gone, the house felt like it had lost its heart. On their quiet street in Alamo Heights, that night stretched endlessly. Throughout the darkness, whispered theories, prayers, and stifled sobs filled the air. The disappearance had been reported, but for the Ramirez family, it was already a nightmare consuming them from within. For San Antonio residents, Isabel's vanishing wasn't just news. It became a stark reminder of vulnerability in a city where historic missions stood as monuments to permanence. As dawn broke on October 8, 2006, the unease lingered. San Antonio residents woke to news alerts on their phones and worried discussions over morning coffee. Stories circulated in taquerias and bus stops. Parents exchanged concerned glances as they dropped children at schools. All conversations centered on Isabel Ramirez. For the Ramirez family, it was their first morning without Isabel, when fear solidified into reality. Police returned early, bringing maps marked with search zones. Carlos pointed out places Isabel frequented: her favorite bookstore, the hiking trail at McAllister Park, her sister's apartment. Miguel tried to recall every detail of their last conversation: her promise to help with the volcano, her cheerful laugh. By 8 a.m., an emergency meeting convened at San Antonio Police Department headquarters. A search team formed, including city police, park rangers, and dozens of community volunteers, fellow teachers from Franklin Elementary, parents of Isabel's students, church members, even strangers moved by the news reports. Hastily printed flyers with Isabel's photo and bold text: "Missing. Have you seen Isabel Ramirez?" Spread across the city. They appeared on light posts along the River Walk, in shop windows at Market Square, on bulletin boards at the Alamo, and at the entrance to La Cantera Mall, where she was last seen. The search began along Isabel's likely routes. Groups spread through shopping centers and residential streets, calling her name with dwindling hope that she was simply lost or injured. K-9 units traced her scent from the Ramirez home to her regular grocery store, then toward La Cantera Mall, but the trail vanished at the massive parking structure as if Isabel had simply evaporated. Police focused their attention on Brackenridge Park, where a groundskeeper reported seeing an abandoned car early that morning. The sprawling park with its winding paths, Japanese tea gardens, and shaded picnic areas was a favorite spot for families and joggers. Dozens of officers and volunteers combed the trails, shining flashlights into thick underbrush, but found nothing. By midday, tension had settled over the search teams. Carlos and Miguel stood at the park's edge, watching, their eyes scanning each returning group with hope that faded with each shake of a police officer's head. San Antonio residents gathered at the cordoned areas, some offering bottled water to searchers, others whispering theories that grew more ominous as the day progressed. Local news crews recorded every development. The San Antonio Express-News ran a second bold headline: "Police expand, search for missing teacher." TV reporters stood with Brackenridge Park's sunlit trees as their backdrop, voices hushed as they described the growing concern across the city. In the late afternoon, the search expanded to include the banks of the San Antonio River beyond the tourist section. Officers split into teams, checking secluded areas where few visitors ventured. When a group of volunteers and police approached a hidden parking area beneath a cypress grove, they spotted a red Honda Civic. Dust coated its windows as if it had sat there since the previous day. As they drew closer, hearts sank. It was Isabel Ramirez's car. Police immediately secured the area, ordering everyone to stand back. Carlos was called to the scene. Upon seeing the familiar vehicle, he seemed to age years in seconds. Miguel remained with neighbors, spared the sight, but not the knowledge that something terrible had happened. Inside the car, police found Isabel's purse on the passenger seat, her wallet untouched with credit cards, and cash still inside. Her phone sat in the cup holder, battery now dead. Her keys dangled from the ignition. Everything suggested Isabel had stepped out briefly intending to return, but she never did. No sign indicated where she had gone. No evidence of a struggle appeared inside the vehicle. The car, silent and still by the river, became a mute witness to an incomprehensible disappearance. As afternoon light filtered through the cypress trees, casting dappled shadows across the scene, officers stood around the car with grim expressions. Carlos watched, his mind fixed on one thought: something unthinkable had happened to Isabel. For the Ramirez family, finding her abandoned car extinguished the faint hope that Isabel was simply delayed. For San Antonio's community, finding the red Honda by the river deepened the mystery and intensified the fear rippling through the city. That evening, as darkness fell over San Antonio, the question, "Where is Isabel?" echoed through neighborhoods from the historic King William district to the modern developments of Stone Oak. It whispered through the breezeways of the Alamo, across the flowing waters of the River Walk, and into every home where families held each other closer, suddenly aware of how quickly ordinary life could shatter. That evening, after the crime scene team had cordoned off the riverside parking lot, San Antonio police decided to tow Isabel Ramirez's red Honda Civic to the station for forensic processing. The car was loaded onto a flatbed truck while Carlos watched, his shoulders hunched against the gathering darkness. Police lights reflected off the river surface, casting eerie blue patterns on the surrounding cypress trees. The vehicle convoy wound through San Antonio's streets, delivering the critical evidence to the Forensic Investigation Lab. At the station, a dedicated area had been prepared, covered with white plastic sheets and surrounded by bright lights. Forensic technicians in full protective gear moved with practiced precision, treating every surface as potentially crucial. They began by photographing the car meticulously: front, rear, driver's side, passenger side, and interior. Every scratch, fingerprint, and speck of dust was documented. When they finally opened the door, the team paused to observe the interior with careful scrutiny. The front seat contained Isabel's leather purse untouched. Inside were her wallet with credit cards, about $60 in cash, and photos of Miguel and Carlos. Her phone lay in the cup holder, now silent after days without charging. The keys remained in the ignition, suggesting Isabel had planned to return quickly. Nothing indicated she expected a prolonged absence from her vehicle. As the examination continued, technicians made a significant discovery. On the floor beneath the passenger seat lay a single silver earring. Carlos confirmed it belonged to Isabel, part of a pair he had given her for their anniversary. The matching earring was missing. This small detail became suddenly significant, suggesting Isabel might have struggled, causing the earring to fall. Even more compelling evidence appeared when technicians examined the trunk. A small, dark stain, barely noticeable on the charcoal carpet lining, stood out under specialized lighting. A forensic technician carefully collected a sample, sealing it in a labeled container. Initial testing suggested it could be blood, potentially crucial evidence that violence had occurred. Another technician, inspecting the driver's seat, discovered several strands of hair caught in the headrest. These hairs were longer and lighter in color than Isabel's dark shoulder-length hair. Each strand was carefully collected with sterile tweezers, sealed in evidence bags, and labeled. Every sample was methodically documented, photographed, and preserved. Yet in 2006, forensic technology faced significant limitations. DNA analysis required comparison to existing records in the CODIS database, which contained profiles only of convicted criminals. The unusual hair strands and potential blood evidence, though preserved with utmost care, couldn't immediately identify a suspect without matching data in the system. Forensic officers expressed their frustration quietly among themselves. These valuable clues might wait years for technology to catch up, or for a suspect's DNA to enter the system. Still, all samples were sealed and stored in temperature-controlled evidence lockers, preserving them for future analysis. While the forensic team worked through the night, news of the car's discovery spread across San Antonio. Local news broadcasts opened with footage of the covered Honda being towed from the riverside, with headlines reading, "Missing teacher's car found empty, search intensifies." At the Ramirez home, Carlos and Miguel sat in silence before the television, watching as Isabel's car appeared on screen. Miguel clutched his mother's cardigan, whispering through tears, "If her car is there, where's Mom?" Carlos had no answer, only holding his son close as their world continued to crumble. The preliminary forensic report offered little comfort. Vehicle recovered in Brackenridge Park, personal belongings intact. No signs of theft. Suspicious stain collected from trunk. Unidentified hair samples recovered from driver's seat. For the police, this report marked another step in their methodical process. But for the Ramirez family, it crystallized their worst fears. Something terrible had happened to Isabel. That night, while her car sat sealed in the police garage, San Antonio endured another night of uncertainty. People discussed the case in coffee shops, at bus stops, and in church prayer groups. Why would a beloved teacher and mother vanish? Why was her car abandoned by the river? For police, this was just the beginning of what promised to be a complex investigation. For the Ramirez family, the car wasn't just evidence, it was a painful reminder that Isabel had been taken from them in ways they still couldn't comprehend. On October 9th, as morning news programs reported updates, bold headlines dominated San Antonio media. Teacher's car found, Isabel Ramirez still missing. The San Antonio Police Department faced mounting pressure from both media and the community. While search efforts continued outdoors, investigators focused on reviewing surveillance footage from La Cantera Mall, where Isabel was last seen. Officers received the security recordings that morning, carefully copying them before loading the files onto dedicated computers. Despite the somewhat grainy quality, the images clearly showed Isabel's movements. She appeared at 9:21 a.m., her crimson blouse visible as she walked from a boutique toward the coffee shop. Nothing seemed unusual about her demeanor. She ordered coffee, chatted briefly with the barista, then exited at 9:23 a.m. An exterior camera captured her walking toward the parking garage, phone to her ear. The moment she called Miguel, Isabel moved calmly through the garage toward her car, unaware of what awaited her. What caught investigators' attention was a dark blue pickup truck that appeared in the frame seconds after Isabel. It moved slowly through the garage, circling the level where Isabel had parked. The truck paused briefly near her row before continuing out of frame. The license plate was partially obscured by a trailer hitch, making it impossible to identify. Investigators replayed this footage repeatedly, focusing on the blue pickup. It wasn't conclusive evidence, but it planted a significant possibility in their minds. Isabel might not have left the garage alone. Meanwhile, police canvassed for witnesses, setting up an information table outside La Cantera Mall with Isabel's photo prominently displayed. Around noon, a mall security guard named Marco approached the officers. He confirmed seeing Isabel in the parking garage that morning. After she got to her car, Marco explained, I saw her talking to a man near the stairwell. I was doing my rounds, so I only noticed them briefly. They seemed to be having a normal conversation, nothing that would raise alarms. When asked to describe the man, Marco hesitated. Average height, maybe early 40s with light brown hair. He wore a navy blue jacket. I couldn't see his face clearly from where I was, and I had no reason to pay special attention. I can't say if they knew each other or if it was just a casual exchange. Police pressed for more details. Did the man follow Isabel? Did they leave together? Marco couldn't say for certain. His patrol had taken him to another level, and when he returned, both Isabel and the man were gone. No. Security camera covered the exact area where this interaction took place, leaving a crucial gap in the visual record. In the briefing room, investigators assembled the timeline. Isabel left the coffee shop at 9:23 a.m. and called her son. A blue pickup appeared in the garage shortly after. A witness saw her speaking with an unknown man. Then, nothing. Both her phone and her movements vanished from all tracking systems. The security footage and witness statement provided tantalizing clues, but not enough for a solid lead. The license plate remained unreadable, the footage too blurry for facial recognition, and the witness account too vague to generate a suspect profile. Everything pointed to something suspicious, but stopped short of conclusive evidence. The Ramirez family was called in for an update. Watching the mall footage, Carlos recognized Isabel's familiar walk, the way she tucked hair behind her ear while on the phone, her slight smile as she spoke with Miguel. The video stopped as she disappeared between parked cars, leaving only emptiness, a visual echo of the void in their lives. She wasn't worried, Carlos said, voice breaking. She had no idea anything was wrong. That means someone did something to her right after this. In San Antonio's tight-knit communities, these new details spread rapidly. People whispered about the blue pickup, the mysterious man in the parking garage. Some claimed they'd seen a similar truck parked near elementary schools. Others reported noticing a man matching the description watching children at parks. These rumors lacked verification, and police logged and investigated each tip, only to dismiss most for lack of corroboration. That evening, news programs replayed the footage of Isabel walking through the mall, slowing down as the blue pickup appeared in frame. The caption read, "Last moments captured on camera. Who was the unknown man Isabel spoke with?" San Antonio watched, many residents feeling a chill of recognition. This could happen to anyone, even in familiar places. From an ordinary teacher shopping on a Saturday morning, Isabel had become the center of an unsettling mystery. And despite promising leads, San Antonio police couldn't yet complete the puzzle. The investigation report concluded, Isabel Ramirez, last seen at La Cantera Mall at 9:23 a.m. Security footage shows blue pickup truck in garage. Witness reports victim speaking with unidentified male. Insufficient data to identify suspect. The next morning's newspaper ran the headline, "Security footage and witness provide clues, but teacher's disappearance remains unsolved." In the Ramirez home, Carlos and Miguel stared at the paper, feeling trapped in a maze where every path led to another dead end. In the days after the security footage aired, Isabel Ramirez's story grew beyond brief news segments, dominating front pages and leading evening broadcasts. But with heightened attention came unwelcome speculation that clouded the image of the woman San Antonio had known. Some media outlets, searching for angles beyond the known facts, began probing aspects of Isabel's personal life. One article mentioned tension between Isabel and school administrators over curriculum changes. Another quoted an anonymous colleague suggesting Isabel seemed distracted in recent weeks. These fragments, lifted from context and amplified, fueled sidewalk whispers and social media conjecture. Most disturbing were the rumors that began circulating in coffee shops and online forums. Maybe she left because of problems at home. Perhaps there was another relationship. The phrases cut deeply into Carlos and Miguel, adding cruel suspicion to their grief. The Ramirez family fought back against these narratives. They appeared on a local morning show, sitting together under the studio lights. Carlos's voice remained steady, despite his obvious exhaustion. Isabel would never abandon her students or her family. She was devoted to her classroom and to our son. Please don't believe baseless rumors. If anyone knows something real, please come forward. Help us bring Isabel home. Miguel, normally shy around cameras, spoke directly to the audience. My mom promised to help with my science project. She always keeps her promises. Something bad happened to her. His words, spoken with childlike clarity, moved many viewers to tears. But rumors, once started, developed their own destructive momentum. They divided the community and weakened search efforts. Some volunteers withdrew, believing they might be searching for someone who had chosen to disappear. Others, convinced Isabel was a victim, grew frustrated with what they perceived as police skepticism. This split became evident at a prayer vigil outside Isabel's school. While hundreds gathered with candles to pray for her safe return, whispered conversations at the edges suggested alternative theories. Carlos became an unwilling focus of scrutiny, with some suggesting he hadn't been forthcoming about their marriage. Though police made no official statement implicating him, their routine questioning of family members fed speculation. At Franklin Elementary, where Isabel taught, some parents discussed Carlos's demeanor on camera instead of organizing search efforts. The unfairness weighed heavily on him. He had lost his wife and now faced silent judgment from neighbors and former friends. For Miguel, school became unbearable. Classmates repeated things they'd heard at home. Your mom probably just left. Some asked bluntly, did your parents fight a lot? These careless words left the 10-year-old confused and angry, often ending with him in the counselor's office, unable to focus on lessons. Each night, the Ramirez family closed their doors against prying eyes and news vans that occasionally still parked on their street, leaving them alone with their grief and uncertainty. Under mounting public pressure, police held a press conference 2 weeks after Isabel's disappearance. The spokesperson chose words carefully. We are considering all possibilities in the Ramirez case, including both voluntary departure and foul play. The investigation remains active on multiple fronts. Instead of reassuring the public, this measured statement inflamed speculation. The next morning's headline read, "Police don't rule out voluntary disappearance in Ramirez case, despite no evidence suggesting Isabel had willingly left her life behind." In a city accustomed to feeling safe, it was perhaps easier to believe a woman had chosen to leave than to accept a predator might be walking among them. Thus San Antonio became divided, those convinced Isabel had met with harm and needed justice, and those who believed she had escaped her life for unknown reasons. For the Ramirez family, this division wasn't just painful. It left them increasingly isolated in their search for truth. Carlos looked at what had once been a supportive community and saw friendly faces replaced with skepticism. He realized they weren't just fighting to find Isabel, but also to preserve her memory and the truth of who she had been in the eyes of a city that was already beginning to forget her real story. On October 25th, nearly 3 weeks after Isabel's car was found, San Antonio police called an emergency meeting to plan next steps. Media pressure remained intense, and public impatience forced authorities to expand their search to more remote areas. That morning, a large map of Bexar County lay spread across the conference table. Red markers indicated new search zones, an abandoned limestone quarry north of the city, dense woodland areas along the Medina River, and several undeveloped properties near Government Canyon State Natural Area. Teams were assigned, volunteers rallied, and families brought supplies to support the expanded effort. The community prepared for what might be their last major push to find Isabel. At the limestone quarry, crumbling industrial structures and deep water-filled pits presented dangerous search conditions. Police deployed specialized dive teams to check the murky pools, while officers with dogs searched the surrounding structures. Flashlights swept across graffiti-covered walls and through empty equipment sheds. Every shadow was examined, every unusual mound of earth probed. After hours of searching, officers emerged empty-handed, faces grim with disappointment. The team leader crossed the quarry off their map with a heavy sigh. Along the Medina River, dense brush and towering cypress trees created a challenging terrain. Volunteers and officers formed lines, moving methodically through the undergrowth, calling Isabel's name, while their voices echoed against the water. They stopped to examine a weathered shed nestled among the trees, forcing the rusted door open, but found only fishing equipment long abandoned by its owner. A young officer kicked at the dirt in frustration. "Another dead end," he muttered, the words carrying more weight than he intended. The search coordinator simply nodded, marking another area as cleared on their increasingly crowded map. Meanwhile, the FBI assisted with advanced sonar equipment at a reservoir near one of the properties on their list. Boats carrying the specialized technology moved slowly across the water, screens displaying objects beneath the surface. The Ramirez family stood on the shore, eyes fixed on the monitors, Carlos holding Miguel's hand so tightly both their knuckles showed white. Hour after hour, the sonar detected various objects, but divers found only submerged logs, old tires, and other debris. Each not her report from the dive team sent visible waves of both relief and despair through Carlos's tense frame. The media followed every development. TV stations broadcast live footage of search teams emerging from wooded areas, reporters narrating with practiced solemnity. At this point, no sign of Isabel Ramirez. Every promising lead has ended in disappointment. The words echoed in living rooms across San Antonio, turning Isabel's disappearance into a collective burden. People questioned whether authorities were doing enough, whether they had missed something obvious, or if Isabel had joined the long list of unsolved missing persons cases in Texas. The Ramirez family was visibly exhausted. Carlos, once energetic and quick to smile, now moved slowly, dark circles under his eyes. Yet he maintained composure for Miguel's sake. "We cannot give up," he said at a church service that Sunday, voice steady despite his visible fatigue. Miguel sat in the front pew, head bowed, shoulders small under the weight of his mother's absence. Reality grew increasingly harsh with each passing day. Expanded searches yielded nothing but disappointment. The press, initially compassionate, adopted a more resigned tone. 3 weeks since Isabel Ramirez's car was found, yet no trace of the missing teacher. In the Ramirez home, tension mounted alongside grief. Newspapers piled on the kitchen table. Carlos couldn't bear to throw them away, yet couldn't stand to read them. Miguel's science project remained unfinished on a shelf, a painful reminder of his mother's broken promise. Carlos kept working, forcing himself through each day, but returning home meant facing the emptiness Isabel's absence had created. He hung their wedding photo prominently in the living room, a reminder of happier times and a symbol of his faith that she would return. But privately, in moments alone, Carlos faced the growing possibility that each day without progress diminished their chances of finding Isabel alive. As the 3rd week of searching concluded, police held another press conference. The spokesperson's statement was brief and disheartening. "We've searched hundreds of acres from quarries to riverbeds, but found nothing conclusive. The case remains open and active, but at this time, we have no breakthrough to report." The crowd outside the station received these words in heavy silence, broken only by the sounds of reporters typing on laptops. That night, San Antonio seemed to collectively exhale in resignation. They had searched everywhere reasonable, followed every feasible lead, but Isabel Ramirez had vanished without a trace. The weight of unsuccessful searches settled over the Ramirez family and their supporters, leaving them with the bitter question that would haunt San Antonio for years to come. What happened to Isabel? By February 2007, nearly 4 months after Isabel Ramirez disappeared, the atmosphere in San Antonio had transformed completely. From days filled with massive searches and media coverage, only a somber resignation remained. Press conferences dwindled to monthly updates that offered no progress. Volunteer numbers dropped from hundreds to a dedicated few. Front-page stories retreated to brief mentions on inner pages, overshadowed by other news. When police announced they had no new leads, it became painfully clear that Isabel's case was entering what investigators solemnly call a cold case status. In a San Antonio Police Department meeting, the lead investigator, Detective Javier Mendoza, who had dedicated himself to finding Isabel for 4 months, stood before his team with visible exhaustion etched on his face. "We've pursued every viable lead," he said, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "The white truck, the witness statement, the mall footage, all dead ends. Without new evidence or a specific suspect, we must transfer this to the cold case unit." His words fell heavily in the room, closing 4 months of relentless but ultimately fruitless effort. That afternoon, a large cardboard box labeled Ramirez Isabel Missing Person October 2006 was placed on a metal shelf in the evidence room. Inside were hundreds of pages of reports, search maps, crime scene photos, and the sealed evidence samples. The blood stain from the trunk, the unidentified hair strands, the lone silver earring. All were carefully preserved, awaiting either new technology or an unexpected breakthrough to breathe life back into the case. Detective Mendoza, approaching retirement after 20 years with the department, made a difficult decision. He would step down from active duty, citing the toll that Isabel's case had taken on him. He had been the face of the investigation, appearing at press conferences, standing beside the Ramirez family, encouraging the community not to lose hope. His departure left Carlos and Miguel feeling abandoned by the system they had trusted to bring Isabel home. In a brief interview with local news, Carlos didn't hide his disappointment. "It feels like the city is forgetting Isabel," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "But for us, for her students, for everyone who loved her, she must never become just a statistic." The Ramirez family began holding their own remembrance ceremonies. On the 7th day of each month, marking the date of Isabel's disappearance, they gathered in Brackenridge Park, near where her car was found. They brought candles and fresh flowers, placing them beside a framed photo of Isabel. Friends, fellow teachers, and former students joined them, forming a circle of light in the growing darkness. Each year on October 7th, they organized a larger memorial at Franklin Elementary School's courtyard, where Isabel had taught. Carlos and Miguel would stand together holding candles while Isabel's favorite songs played softly. Voices joined in prayer or shared memories of her kindness, her passion for teaching, her infectious laugh. These gatherings, though smaller each year, kept Isabel's memory alive in a city that was gradually forgetting. For Carlos and Miguel, these ceremonies were essential. They ensured the world remembered Isabel not just as a case file number, but as a woman who had touched countless lives through her teaching and generosity. The media occasionally revisited the story on anniversaries, but the tone shifted from initial urgency to retrospective sadness. Headlines like, "5 years later, the unsolved disappearance of San Antonio teacher," appeared briefly before being replaced by current events. Such stories cut deeply for the Ramirez family, who never experienced Isabel's absence as a passing news item, but lived with it every moment. Yet for much of San Antonio, time had blurred the sharp edges of the mystery, and Isabel Ramirez became another name on Texas's long list of unsolved missing persons cases. In the community, Isabel's case became a shadow that fell across conversations about safety and trust. Some admitted openly, "At first we held hope, but after so much time, if she were alive, surely she would have found a way to contact her family." Others perpetuated older rumors. "Maybe she did leave on her own. People have secret lives we never see." These whispers never fully died, leaving a fracture in the community's once unshakable sense of security. Carlos continued working as an architect, trying to maintain normalcy for Miguel's sake. But the Ramirez home felt perpetually incomplete. Isabel's reading chair remained in the corner of the living room. Her favorite mug still hung on its hook in the kitchen. Carlos kept her clothes in the closet, unable to part with them, despite well-meaning suggestions from friends. Miguel, growing from a child into a teenager, carried the weight of his mother's absence through crucial years of development. Each time Carlos drove past San Antonio Police Headquarters, he looked at the building with a mixture of gratitude for their efforts and disappointment in their inability to solve the case. He knew Isabel's file sat somewhere inside, gathering dust, waiting for someone to reopen it. But as years passed, that prospect seemed increasingly remote. Isabel's story, once a shocking event that unified the city in concern, faded into brief mentions during discussions of unsolved crimes, or the occasional reference during awareness campaigns for missing persons. For the Ramirez family, those first 4 months were only the beginning of a 16-year journey through grief, uncertainty, and the slow process of learning to live with unanswered questions. After the October 2014 remembrance ceremony, marking 8 years since Isabel vanished, her disappearance entered what could only be described as deep silence. Each year, the San Antonio Express-News dedicated a small paragraph mentioning the anniversary, usually buried on an inner page, a fading memory rather than breaking news. No more dramatic headlines, no images of search teams combing riverbanks, just a small photo of Isabel with the caption, "8 years later, still no answers in teacher's disappearance." The Ramirez family continued their monthly candle lightings, but attendance dwindled steadily. The first anniversary had drawn crowds of neighbors, colleagues, students, and their parents. By 2014, only close family members and a few loyal friends remained. They stood in a small circle in Brackenridge Park, reciting quiet prayers, then quickly dispersed as evening fell. For the family, it was the only way to resist the encroaching oblivion that threatened to erase Isabel completely. Miguel Ramirez went from being a 10-year-old when his mother disappeared to an 18-year-old high school graduate preparing for college. Throughout his adolescence, Miguel carried a burning obsession, the feeling that his mother had not just vanished physically, but was being erased from public memory. He vividly recalled the day police moved the case to the cold case unit, when headlines read, "A case gone cold," and it seemed the city had collectively decided to move on. Those words haunted him, turning his mother's memory into an ever more distant echo. In his journal, Miguel wrote, "Mom didn't just disappear on her way from the mall. She's disappearing from this city's memory, and that hurts more than anything." Carlos, meanwhile, maintained his daily routines: work, home, occasional dinner with friends, who knew not to mention Isabel unless he brought her up first. Over time, he spoke of his wife less frequently, not because he was forgetting, but because each mention reopened wounds that never fully healed. This unintentional silence created distance between him and Miguel, who felt increasingly alone in his determination to keep his mother's case alive. In the broader San Antonio community, Isabel's memory faded with each passing year. The city evolved. The Riverwalk expanded, new tech companies moved in, neighborhoods transformed. For many residents, especially newcomers, the 2006 disappearance was barely a footnote in local history. There was a teacher who vanished years ago, right? Was she ever found? The casual question and subsequent shrug became increasingly common. This gradual forgetting fueled Miguel's determination. After graduating high school in 2014, He chose to attend the University of Texas at San Antonio, specifically to remain close to home and continue advocating for his mother's case. He studied criminal justice, driven by a singular purpose, to understand the system that had failed to find Isabel and perhaps to change it from within. Miguel tried writing to national television shows featuring cold cases, hoping for attention, but received only form responses. "We receive many submissions and cannot feature every case." The indifference felt like another door closing on Isabel's story. By 2018, Miguel graduated with honors and immediately applied to the San Antonio Police Academy. When asked during his interview why he wanted to become an officer, his answer was simple and direct: "Because I know what it feels like when justice stops looking for you." His personal connection to a famous cold case made him notable among cadets, though most instructors were careful not to discuss Isabel directly with him. For nearly 12 years, Isabel's evidence remained untouched in the department's cold storage. The blood sample from the trunk, the unidentified hair, the silver earring, all preserved but unexamined as newer cases demanded resources and attention. San Antonio police balanced hundreds of active investigations, and older cases inevitably received less priority. Isabel Ramirez became just one name among many in Texas's database of unsolved missing persons cases. Yet for the Ramirez family, especially Miguel, the silence was never an acceptance of defeat. Each candle lit during their monthly remembrances, each prayer spoken, each memory shared, kept alive a flicker of hope that someday the silence would break and the truth about Isabel would emerge from the shadows that had concealed it for so long. In January 2022, as San Antonio emerged from pandemic restrictions, a significant change occurred in the police department's cold case division. In an office filled with file boxes and digital archives, a new detective arrived. Sofia Martinez, 36, transferred from Houston's homicide division with a reputation for solving cases others had abandoned. Known for her meticulous attention to detail and ability to see connections others missed, Martinez believed that cold never meant closed when it came to justice. Among hundreds of files waiting for review, her attention was captured by one name: Isabel Ramirez, missing since October 2006. Opening the box, Martinez found faded photos, witness statements, and the original investigation notes. The case had multiple aspects that intrigued her. A woman with no reason to disappear, evidence suggesting foul play, and preserved physical samples that might yield results with newer technology. From the first page of the report, Martinez sensed this wasn't a voluntary disappearance, as some had suggested, but a concealed crime. She spent weeks immersing herself in every document, statement, and note from Detective Mendoza before his retirement. One detail caught her attention and wouldn't let go. The 2006 forensic report clearly noted a blood stain in the trunk and unidentified hair in the driver's seat. Back then, without a suspect for comparison, the samples provided limited value. But DNA technology had advanced tremendously in 16 years. "This is our opening," Martinez whispered, alone in the evidence room. She immediately contacted Texas's Advanced Forensic Laboratory to inquire about reanalyzing the old samples with genetic genealogy techniques, a revolutionary approach that had cracked decades-old cold cases across the country. Recent breakthroughs meant a small DNA sample could now be used to construct family trees, trace distant relatives, and narrow down potential suspects in ways impossible in 2006. For Isabel's case, this technology might finally illuminate what 16 years of darkness had hidden. Before sending the samples, Martinez contacted Carlos and Miguel Ramirez, meeting them one evening at their home. In their living room, still adorned with Isabel's photos, she explained her intentions. "I know you've heard similar promises before," she said carefully, "but we have technology now that didn't exist when Isabel disappeared. I want to re-examine the evidence using genetic genealogy. It might tell us whose DNA was in Isabel's car." Miguel, now 26 and a police officer himself, looked at Martinez with cautious hope. Carlos, his hair now grey, simply nodded. 16 years, he said quietly. If there's even a chance now, we can't ignore it. In the following weeks, Martinez completed the paperwork to retrieve the evidence from cold storage. She signed for each sealed bag as if handling precious artifacts. In many ways, they were. She watched as lab technicians carefully removed the carpet sample, containing the bloodstain, and retrieved the hair strands preserved since 2006. All were placed in specialized containers and sent to an advanced genetics lab in Austin. News of the case being reopened spread through San Antonio police circles first. A small article appeared in the Express News. SAPD cold case, detective reopens 2006 teacher disappearance. Though buried on page 4, it stirred memories across the city. Some who had joined the original search sent messages of encouragement. We still remember Isabel. Hope modern science brings answers. While awaiting results, Martinez reconstructed the case from scratch. She rebuilt the timeline of October 7, 2006, Isabel leaving home, appearing on mall cameras, the blue pickup following her, and the witness seeing her speak with an unknown man. She created a detailed board in her office, red strings connecting events, forming a visual map of the mystery. During late nights when the office was empty, Martinez sat alone, staring at the board. 16 years of silence hadn't diminished the case's importance or her determination. She believed genetic genealogy would unlock what Detective Mendoza couldn't, the identity of whoever had crossed paths with Isabel that October morning. The DNA results arrived from the Austin lab on a warm April morning in 2022. Martinez opened the sealed envelope with steady hands, reading, DNA profile indicates Hispanic male, consistent with Gomez family lineage from South Texas region. Match probability 87%. Her heart raced. After 16 years, Isabel's case had its first substantial lead. Martinez immediately contacted genealogical experts to dig deeper. From comprehensive databases, they narrowed dozens of possible matches to several men of appropriate age. One name stood out, Rafael Gomez, 58, a former maintenance worker who had lived in San Antonio until 2007, when he abruptly moved to Laredo. Checking his background, Martinez discovered Gomez had worked maintenance at several San Antonio shopping centers in 2006, including La Cantera Mall. Cross-referencing employment records, she found he had been on duty October 7, 2006, the very day Isabel vanished. A chill ran through her as another piece aligned. Vehicle registration records showed Gomez had owned a dark blue pickup truck in 2006. Martinez wrote on her caseboard, Rafael Gomez, at the mall, maintenance access, blue truck, left SA in 2007. A red string connected his name to the mall security footage, still showing the blue pickup. 16 years of disconnected evidence suddenly formed a coherent pattern. Deeper research revealed Gomez had a minor criminal record, a domestic violence complaint in 1998 that was later dropped when the complainant refused to testify. Former co-workers described him as quiet, sometimes watching women in the mall in a way that made them uncomfortable, though no formal complaints were ever filed. Martinez envisioned a scenario that finally made sense, a maintenance worker with access to all areas of the mall, watching Isabel, following her to her car, perhaps offering help or claiming there was an issue with her vehicle. While this remained speculation, the DNA, location, vehicle, and sudden departure from San Antonio after the disappearance formed a compelling picture. Working with the FBI and cold case specialists, Martinez coordinated discreet surveillance of Gomez's current residence in Laredo. Teams monitored his movements, documenting his routines from the restaurant where he now worked to his small apartment. Every detail was logged, building a current profile while waiting for final DNA confirmation. Martinez met with the Ramirez family again. In their living room, she carefully shared what they had found. We have a DNA match to a specific family. It points to a man named Rafael Gomez, who worked at La Cantera Mall when Isabel disappeared. He owned a blue pickup truck and left San Antonio shortly afterward. Miguel's eyes widened. After years of police academy training and joining the force himself, he understood the significance of this breakthrough. You mean all this time, his DNA was sitting in evidence, waiting for technology to catch up? Martinez nodded. And now we have a name. Carlos sat silently, tears welling in his eyes. For the first time in 16 years, the shapeless dread that had haunted him had a name and a face. Martinez presented her findings to the San Antonio Police Department command staff in a closed-door meeting. Some senior officers expressed skepticism. Just DNA from the car and a coincidental work location, enough for an arrest after 16 years. But Martinez stood firm. This isn't coincidence. We have his DNA in her car, his employment placing him at the exact location on the exact day, the blue truck matching security footage, and his suspicious departure from San Antonio shortly after. These aren't random connections. Investigators revisited old witness statements, particularly the mall security guard who had seen Isabel speaking with an unknown man. Shown a photo array including an image of Gomez from 2006, the guard paused at Gomez's photo. I can't be 100% certain after so long, but this looks very much like the man I saw talking to her. Another piece fit the puzzle. Through winter and spring of 2022, surveillance on Gomez continued quietly. The team collected items he discarded, a coffee cup, a cigarette butt tossed outside his apartment. These were sent to the lab for comparison with the original DNA samples from Isabel's car. Results confirmed a perfect match. As evidence mounted, Martinez drafted an arrest warrant with the district attorney's office. The document detailed every connection between Gomez and Isabel's disappearance, DNA evidence, his work location, the matching vehicle, the witness identification, and his suspicious relocation immediately following the incident. While awaiting final approval, Martinez continued building the case meticulously, knowing that after 16 years, they would have only one chance to bring this case to justice. In the Ramirez home, a fragile hope began to grow. Miguel, now a police officer himself, understood the process better than most and explained each step to his father. "They're making sure everything is perfect before making an arrest," he said. "This has to be done right. For Mom." For the first time since 2006, Carlos allowed himself to believe that Isabel might finally receive justice. The mysterious shadow that had hung over their lives for 16 years was taking solid form, and with it came the possibility of answers, accountability, and perhaps even closure. While Martinez gathered final evidence to secure the arrest warrant, San Antonio held its breath, unaware that one of its longest-standing mysteries stood on the threshold of resolution. For Isabel Ramirez, 16 years of silence was about to end. On May 12, 2022, after months of careful investigation and evidence gathering, Detective Sofia Martinez received the signed arrest warrant for Rafael Gomez. The document, thick with 16 years of accumulated evidence, authorized police to apprehend the 58-year-old former maintenance worker now living in Laredo. In the early morning briefing at San Antonio Police Headquarters, Martinez addressed the tactical team. "This is not just another arrest," she said, her voice steady but intense. "This represents 16 years of waiting for the Ramirez family. We have one chance to do this right." Officers nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of what lay ahead. A coordinated effort between San Antonio Police and Laredo authorities was planned with precision. At 5:30 a.m. on May 14th, tactical teams positioned themselves around Gomez's small apartment complex on the outskirts of Laredo. The sky was still dark, the streets quiet as unmarked vehicles blocked both ends of the road. Officers in tactical gear approached silently, taking positions at front and rear exits. Detective Martinez watched from the command vehicle, heart pounding, as the operation she had spent months preparing finally unfolded. At exactly 5:45 a.m., the radio crackled. "All units in position. Go!" The front door shuddered under the impact of a battering ram. "Police! Search warrant! Open the door!" The shout jolted the neighborhood awake as tactical officers breached the entrance. Inside the cluttered apartment, Rafael Gomez stumbled from his bedroom, disoriented and shocked. "What is happening? What is this?" He stammered as officers secured him, placing handcuffs around his wrists. Neighbors emerged from nearby apartments, gathering in small clusters to watch the scene unfold. A middle-aged woman whispered to her husband, "He always seemed so quiet. Kept to himself but was polite when you passed him." Another neighbor shook his head in disbelief. "He's fixed my sink twice." Never would have imagined. The shock rippled through the complex as Gomez, wearing a faded t-shirt and sweatpants, was escorted to a waiting police vehicle. His face, lined with age and shock, appeared in stark contrast to the composed demeanor he had maintained for 16 years. "You've got the wrong person," he insisted as cameras flashed. "I don't know what you're talking about." Within hours, images of Gomez's arrest dominated Texas news stations. Headlines flashed across screens. "Arrest made in 2006. San Antonio teacher disappearance and cold case breakthrough. Suspect detained after 16 years. In a brief press conference later that morning, the San Antonio police chief stood beside Detective Martinez, addressing the gathered media. "After 16 years, we have arrested Rafael Gomez, 58, in connection with the disappearance and presumed death of Isabel Ramirez. Advanced DNA technology and dedicated detective work have linked Mr. Gomez conclusively to this case." Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing continuously. One journalist called out, "What was the suspect's motive?" Martinez stepped forward, her response measured. "The investigation is ongoing. What we can say with certainty is that this was a deliberate act, not a random encounter. Mr. Gomez worked at La Cantera Mall where Isabel was last seen and owned a vehicle matching the one in security footage. In the Ramirez home, Carlos and Miguel sat before the television, watching Gomez in handcuffs being led into the police station. The image struck them with physical force. This stranger, this ordinary-looking man, was potentially the answer to the question that had haunted them for 16 years. Carlos gripped the armchair, his knuckles white. "Finally," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Finally, someone will answer for taking Isabel." Miguel, now a police officer himself, watched with professional detachment, battling personal anguish. He understood the process ahead, interrogations, evidence processing, court proceedings, yet beneath his composure, a storm of emotions churned. "Mom," he said quietly, "we never stopped looking." The media explosion was immediate and far-reaching. Headlines dominated every platform. Arrest in 16-year cold case stuns San Antonio, and DNA technology cracks teacher's disappearance. Television stations featured experts discussing genetic genealogy, calling it a revolutionary tool for solving cold cases. Social media filled with memories from Isabel's former students, now adults, sharing how their beloved teacher had shaped their lives. San Antonio buzzed with the news. Many gathered at Franklin Elementary School, where Isabel had taught, placing flowers and candles beneath the memorial plaque installed years earlier. Conversations in coffee shops, at bus stops, and in church groups revolved around one question: how had a killer lived among them for so long undetected? Some expressed outrage. He worked at that mall for months after she vanished, walking the same halls, watching the searches. Others felt confused and betrayed. "I shopped there while he was working. He might have helped me find a store or fix a door, all while knowing what he'd done." For Detective Sofia Martinez, Gomez's arrest wasn't the end, but a beginning. She knew the road ahead, prosecution, trial, uncovering the full truth, would be challenging. But after 16 years of darkness, justice finally had a face and a name. For the Ramirez family, it was a day to believe Isabel, wherever she was, might find peace in knowing the truth was emerging at last. As Carlos told reporters who gathered outside their home, "This is the day we've waited for since 2006, the day someone answers for taking Isabel from us." In the San Antonio Police Interrogation Room on May 15, 2022, Rafael Gomez sat hunched in a metal chair, handcuffed to the table. His face showed the strain of sleepless nights in custody, his grey hair disheveled, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Across from him, Detective Sofia Martinez placed a thick file on the table, her gaze steady and penetrating. "Mr. Gomez," Martinez began, "we know you worked maintenance at La Cantera Mall in October 2006. We know you drove a blue pickup truck. And we know your DNA was found in Isabel Ramirez's car." Gomez shook his head vigorously, denial written across his face. "I don't know any teacher. I've never heard that name in my life," he insisted, his voice rising with apparent indignation. Martinez didn't respond immediately. Instead, she opened the file, removing photos of Isabel's car, the mall security footage showing the blue pickup, and most damning, the DNA report comparing the 2006 samples to his recent discards. "Science doesn't lie, Mr. Gomez," Martinez said calmly. "Your blood was in her trunk. Your hair was in her car. 16 years is a long time, but DNA remains unchanged." As Martinez methodically laid out the evidence, his work schedule, placing him at the mall that Saturday morning, the witness who saw a man matching his description speaking with Isabel, his sudden relocation to Laredo shortly after her disappearance, Gomez's confident denial began to crumble. He stared at the table, avoiding eye contact, his breathing becoming more labored. Then, without warning, he looked up with flashing eyes. "You'll never find her body." The room fell into shocked silence. Martinez kept her expression neutral, though inside her heart raced. Gomez had just implicitly admitted not only to knowing Isabel, but to her death and the concealment of her remains. "What did you say?" Martinez asked, her voice deliberately calm. Gomez clenched his jaw, turning away, refusing to speak further. But his slip, whether intentional or accidental, was a crucial break in the case. In her report, Martinez noted, "Subject stated you'll never find her body," implying knowledge of victim's location and confirming her death. The district attorney, reading this statement, nodded grimly. "This is as good as a confession. He knows she's dead, and he knows where she is. Now we need to find out exactly where that is." The investigation shifted focus from merely tying Gomez to the crime, to discovering where Isabel had been hidden for 16 years. In subsequent interrogations spanning several days, Gomez alternated between complete silence and angry outbursts. He claimed he was being framed, that police had planted evidence, that he was just a scapegoat for an incompetent investigation. Martinez listened patiently, occasionally mentioning specific details: the silver earring found in Isabel's car, the bloodstain in the trunk, the blue pickup seen following her. Each detail seemed to agitate Gomez further. His eyes betrayed unease whenever Martinez mentioned the mall's service corridors or asked about remote areas he might have known around San Antonio. After 4 days of interrogation, with mounting pressure from the evidence and his own slip of the tongue, Gomez finally broke. On the evening of May 19th, in a small interrogation room with only Martinez and a court recorder present, Gomez crossed his arms over his chest, eyes fixed on the floor. "If you want to find her," he said in a low voice, "look in the abandoned quarry north of Loop 1604. There's an old equipment shed by the south wall. She's there." The words sent a chill through Martinez's body, confirming what she had suspected but dreaded. Isabel Ramirez had never left San Antonio alive. Within the hour, a convoy of police vehicles, forensic teams, and the medical examiner headed to the limestone quarry that had actually been searched during the initial investigation in 2006, but not thoroughly enough to discover the hidden shed Gomez described. The quarry, abandoned since the 1990s, stretched across acres of rugged terrain north of the city. Crumbling rock walls and overgrown access roads gave it a desolate appearance, as if the land itself had been waiting 16 years for its secret to be revealed. Police sealed off the area, setting up floodlights as evening approached. A forensic team in white protective suits approached the dilapidated equipment shed, nestled against the quarry's southern wall. Years of weather had partially collapsed the roof, and thick vegetation had grown around the structure, helping to conceal it from previous searches. With methodical care, they began clearing debris and preparing for excavation. Carlos and Miguel Ramirez stood behind the police tape with a small group of relatives who had gathered after hearing the news. Carlos appeared composed but pale, his hand gripping Miguel's shoulder as if to steady himself. "Whatever they find," he told his son, "Isabel comes home today." After 2 hours of careful digging beneath the shed's concrete floor, a technician called out, "We found something." The site fell silent. As they continued excavating with increased care, human remains gradually became visible. A skull, rib bones, the delicate bones of hands. Working with painstaking precision, they uncovered a complete skeleton, aged by 16 years in the earth. Near the remains, they found a small jewelry box containing a silver earring, the match to the one found in Isabel's car, and a necklace Carlos had given Isabel on their 10th anniversary. Miguel collapsed to his knees at the sight, tears streaming down his face. Carlos stood rigid, unable to move or speak, his worst fears confirmed, yet somehow bringing a terrible relief after years of uncertainty. News spread rapidly through waiting reporters. Live broadcasts cut into regular programming. Remains believed to be Isabel Ramirez, recovered from quarry after suspect confession. After 16 years, San Antonio teacher may finally be coming home. In homes across the city, people paused before their screens, many wiping away tears for a woman most had never met, but whose story had become part of the city's collective consciousness. Carlos and Miguel were permitted to view the recovered items once they had been properly documented. When Carlos held the necklace he had given Isabel years ago, his composure finally broke. Sobs racked his body as he clutched the small pendant, its surface dulled by years underground but still recognizable. Miguel embraced his father, both men weeping for the woman they had lost and searched for across 16 years. Detective Martinez approached, placing a gentle hand on Carlos's shoulder. "I promised you we wouldn't stop until we found the truth. Isabel is coming home." Carlos looked up, eyes red but grateful. "Thank you. After all this time, we finally know." The remains were transported to the medical examiner's office for DNA confirmation and analysis. But in everyone's hearts there was no doubt Isabel Ramirez had been found. The city held an impromptu vigil that evening. Hundreds brought candles to Franklin Elementary School, filling the courtyard with light. They sang hymns and shared memories of the teacher who had touched so many lives before her own was cut short. Isabel's photo, the same one used on missing person posters 16 years earlier, stood surrounded by white roses and flickering candles. Her former student, now a young adult, whispered through tears she finally made it home. For San Antonio police, finding Isabel's remains wasn't just a case closure, but proof that justice, though delayed, could still find its path. For the Ramirez family, it marked the day pain became tangible truth, no longer a mystery, but a reality they could finally begin to process and, perhaps someday, move beyond. Isabel's remains were sent directly to the Bexar County Medical Examiner's office after recovery. For weeks, forensic anthropologists meticulously analyzed every bone, every trace of evidence, reconstructing what had happened in her final moments. The final report arrived on Detective Martinez's desk in June 2022. She opened it with trepidation, knowing the clinical details would paint a disturbing picture of violence. Isabel's skull showed fractures consistent with multiple blows from a heavy object, likely a maintenance tool like a wrench or hammer. Her right arm bones displayed defensive fractures, indicating she had raised her arm to protect herself during the attack. Most telling were the minute scratches on her finger bones, evidence she had fought desperately, clawing at her attacker. This explained the DNA under her fingernails that had ultimately led to Gomez's arrest 16 years later. The report stated clinically, Victim shows clear signs of defensive wounds and resistance. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the head. Manner of death, homicide. Martinez closed the file momentarily, composing herself before continuing. The scientific analysis confirmed what she had pieced together over months of investigation. On October 7, 2006, Isabel Ramirez had gone to La Cantera Mall for routine shopping. Rafael Gomez, working maintenance that day, had noticed her, perhaps had been watching her for some time. Security footage showed his blue pickup following her from the garage. Using his maintenance uniform as cover, he likely approached her with some pretext, a car issue, a security concern. The mall security guard had seen them talking, nothing seemingly amiss. But somewhere between that conversation and her car, something changed. A struggle ensued. Isabel fought fiercely, scratching, screaming, trying to escape. But Gomez, using a tool from his maintenance kit, struck her repeatedly until she fell. He then placed her in her own car's trunk, explaining the blood evidence found there. He drove her car to the riverside parking lot, then used his pickup to transport her body to the remote quarry where he had previously worked and knew of the abandoned equipment shed. There, he buried Isabel beneath the concrete floor, taking her earring and necklace before covering all traces of his crime. In the briefing room, Martinez presented these findings to the prosecution team and, with gentle caution, to the Ramirez family. Upon hearing how fiercely Isabel had fought, Miguel covered his face, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Carlos sat straighter, a strange pride mixing with his grief. "She never gave up," he said softly. "Even at the end, Isabel fought to come home to us." Martinez nodded, placing a hand on his shoulder. And that fight left the evidence that eventually brought her justice. For San Antonio residents, the published report brought another wave of shock and grief. Headlines detailed the forensic findings with respectful restraint. Isabel Ramirez fought for her life. Evidence shows. Articles describe the teacher's final struggle, her determination to survive, and how her resistance ultimately provided the DNA evidence that solved her case 16 years later. The community responded with an outpouring of support for the Ramirez family and admiration for Isabel's courage. Memorial donations flooded Franklin Elementary, funding a permanent scholarship in Isabel's name for students pursuing education careers. In the cold case unit, Martinez carefully updated the case board one final time. Beside Isabel's photo, she pinned a simple note: "She never stopped fighting." Those 4 words became the unit's unofficial motto, a reminder that no case was truly hopeless if the victim had left even the smallest clue behind. With the evidence complete and Gomez's confession on record, the case moved rapidly toward trial. On September 8, 2022, in the Bexar County Courthouse, the formal indictment against Rafael Gomez was announced. After months of evidence preparation and witness coordination, the district attorney charged Gomez with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and improper disposal of human remains. The 50-page indictment detailed every aspect of the crime: DNA evidence in Isabel's car, witness testimony from the mall, forensic analysis of her remains, and Gomez's own damning statement leading police to her body. The press room was packed with reporters as the district attorney stood beside Detective Martinez, holding up the indictment for cameras. "Today, we charge Rafael Gomez for the heinous acts that took Isabel Ramirez from her family and community," the prosecutor announced, voice resonating through the room. "Justice has been 16 years in coming, but it has arrived with certainty and finality." Carlos and Miguel sat in the front row during the announcement. As the charges were read, Miguel held his father's hand, both men stoic but visibly moved. For the Ramirez family, the indictment wasn't just a legal document. It was validation of their 16-year insistence that Isabel hadn't left willingly, but had been taken through violence. Outside the courthouse, San Antonio residents gathered by the hundreds, many holding candles despite the daylight. Some carried signs with Isabel's photo and messages like "Justice after 16 years" and "San Antonio remembers Isabel." A group of her former students, now in their 20s, stood together wearing red, the color of the blouse Isabel had worn on her last day. The media covered every aspect of the story. The Express News ran a front-page headline, "Rafael Gomez formally charged in Isabel Ramirez murder." Television specials analyzed how genetic genealogy had revolutionized cold case investigations, highlighting Isabel's case as one of Texas's most significant breakthroughs. For Detective Sofia Martinez, the indictment day marked the culmination of her work since first opening that dusty case file in January. She had taken a 16-year-old mystery with fading hope and transformed it into a solid case heading to trial. The relief and satisfaction she felt were tempered by the knowledge that nothing could bring Isabel back to her family. That evening, Carlos and Miguel lit candles on their front porch, not in pleading or uncertainty as they had for 16 years, but in remembrance and gratitude. The soft glow illuminated Isabel's photo, her gentle smile seemingly at peace for the first time since her disappearance. Neighbors joined them, forming a circle of light that spread down the street. A pastor who had known Isabel offered a simple prayer: "Justice delayed is not justice denied." In San Antonio that night, those words resonated with special meaning, a promise to all victims that they would not be forgotten no matter how much time passed. The trial of Rafael Gomez began on November 10th, 2022. The courthouse was filled beyond capacity, with overflow rooms set up for those who couldn't fit in the main courtroom. 16 years of waiting had culminated in this moment, when Isabel's story would finally be told in full. The prosecution presented a methodical case, walking the jury through every piece of evidence, from the mall security footage to the DNA analysis to the recovery of Isabel's remains. Detective Martinez testified for 2 full days, explaining how modern technology had illuminated what had once been hidden. The defense attempted to create doubt about the reliability of genetic genealogy and questioned the chain of custody for evidence stored for 16 years. But their arguments seemed hollow against the overwhelming physical evidence and Gomez's own incriminating statements. After 7 days of testimony and arguments, the jury retired to deliberate. For the Ramirez family, these hours of waiting were among the most difficult they had endured. Carlos and Miguel sat in a private room at the courthouse, barely speaking, hands clasped in shared anxiety. After just 5 hours, remarkably brief for such a complex case, the jury returned. As they filed into the courtroom, their solemn expressions gave nothing away. The judge asked for their verdict, and the forewoman stood, paper trembling slightly in her hands. "On the count of first-degree murder, we find the defendant, Rafael Gomez, guilty. On the count of kidnapping, guilty. On the count of improper disposal of human remains, guilty." The courtroom erupted in emotional release, soft sobs, whispered prayers of thanks, and the sound of Carlos Ramirez weeping openly for the first time in public. Miguel embraced his father, tears streaming down his face. Detective Martinez closed her eyes briefly, exhaling 16 years of uncertainty. The judge called for order, his voice firm but compassionate. When the room quieted, he addressed Gomez directly. "You have been found guilty of taking a beloved teacher, mother, and wife from this community. You will serve life without the possibility of parole, remembering each day the life you stole and the family you devastated." Headlines across Texas proclaimed, "Justice for Isabel. Gomez found guilty on all counts." Television broadcasts showed the Ramirez family emerging from the courthouse, surrounded by supporters holding candles despite the daylight, a symbol of the light that had finally pierced 16 years of darkness. In May 2023, 6 months after the trial, Isabel Ramirez was finally laid to rest at San Fernando Cemetery. The funeral, delayed to allow time for all forensic procedures to be completed, became a city-wide remembrance. Hundreds attended, Family, friends, former students now grown, colleagues from Franklin Elementary, and citizens who had never met Isabel but had carried her story in their hearts. The white casket covered with crimson roses bore a simple inscription: Isabel Ramirez, 1974-2006. Beloved teacher, mother, wife, never forgotten. Carlos stood beside the grave, his voice steady despite his grief. 16 years we searched for this day. Isabel is finally at peace. Miguel, now a detective himself, inspired by Martinez's work on his mother's case, read a letter to Isabel. Mom, you fought until your last moment, and we fought to find the truth. Your struggle wasn't in vain. It brought justice, not just for you, but hope for other families still waiting. San Fernando Cemetery, the final resting place for generations of San Antonio residents, now held a name that had become synonymous with persistence and delayed but certain justice. People left flowers and notes, some from former second graders now in college, thanking Mrs. Ramirez for lessons that extended far beyond the classroom. International media continued to follow the story. A documentary titled 16 Years of Silence aired on major networks, examining how Isabel's case had changed cold case investigation methods across the country. Detective Martinez was interviewed by national news programs, always redirecting praise to Isabel herself. She left us the evidence we needed. I just listened to what she was telling us. In San Antonio, Isabel's legacy took concrete form. Franklin Elementary renamed its library the Isabel Ramirez Learning Center. The police department established a specialized cold case division, inspired by her case, dedicated to reviewing unsolved disappearances with new technological approaches. Miguel Ramirez transferred to this division, bringing personal understanding to his work with other families waiting for answers. In an interview, he explained simply, I know what it feels like to live in uncertainty. No family should wait 16 years for truth. For Carlos, life continued with a newfound peace beneath his lingering grief. He volunteered with missing persons organizations, offering support to families experiencing the same pain he had endured. Isabel taught me that love doesn't end with loss, he told a support group. It transforms into action. San Antonio had changed in the 16 years since Isabel's disappearance. New buildings rose on the skyline, new families moved into old neighborhoods, and children who had never heard of Isabel Ramirez played in parks she once visited. But beneath these changes, the city carried her story, a reminder that justice may arrive slowly, but it arrives with certainty when a community refuses to forget. On the anniversary of Gomez's conviction, Detective Martinez visited Isabel's grave alone. She placed a single crimson rose beside the headstone and stood in silence for several moments. We found you, she whispered finally. And because of you, we'll find others. That's your legacy, Isabel. And Martinez walked away. The Texas sun cast her shadow long across the cemetery grounds, a fitting symbol for how one woman's determination had extended justice across years of silence, bringing light where darkness had prevailed, and proving that no voice, however temporarily silenced, is ever truly lost when someone chooses to listen. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.